I never thought much about emergency contacts until the day Marcus asked to be mine. We were sitting in his living room, him on the worn leather chair he'd probably owned since the 90s, me on the couch with my laptop balanced on my knees, filling out paperwork for a new insurance policy. The afternoon light was doing that golden thing through his windows, and I was only half paying attention to the form because he was telling me this story about his neighbour's cat that kept breaking into his apartment through a window he didn't realise was broken. I got to the emergency contact section, and my pen just hovered there. My parents lived 3 states away. My sister and I hadn't spoken in months after a stupid argument about Thanksgiving plans. I had friends, sure, but nobody who felt right for that particular blank space. Nobody who I'd want showing up at a hospital to make decisions about my life if I couldn't. Marcus must have noticed me staring at the page because he stopped mid-sentence about the cat. "You okay, Dylan?" he asked. I looked up at him. He was 63 years old, with silver hair he kept just a little too long, and these reading glasses he always wore pushed up on his head like he forgot they were there. I'd known him for almost 2 years at that point. He was my landlord, technically, living in the unit above mine in this old converted house. But somewhere along the way we'd become something more than that. Friends felt too simple. He was the person I had coffee with every morning, the person whose door I knocked on when I couldn't sleep, the person who knew how I took my tea and which brand of crackers I liked, and that I got weird and quiet on the anniversary of my grandfather's death. "Just thinking about who to put down here," I said, tapping the form. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "You could put me down if you wanted." I remember exactly how he said it. Casual, like he was offering to lend me a book, but there was something underneath it, something careful, like he was trying not to make it a big deal, even though maybe it was. "Really?" I asked. "I'd be honoured," he said, and the way his voice went soft on that word, honoured, it did something to my chest, made it feel tight and warm at the same time. I wrote his name down, Marcus Chen, his phone number that I already knew by heart, and I felt this strange sense of relief, like I'd just solved a problem I didn't know I had. "Thank you," I said. He smiled at me, one of those small smiles that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and went back to his cat story like nothing had happened. But something had happened. I just didn't understand what yet. We'd met when I moved into the downstairs apartment on a rainy Tuesday in October. I was 28, fresh out of a relationship that had ended badly, looking for a cheap place where I could lick my wounds and figure out what I was doing with my life. The apartment was perfect, affordable, in a quiet neighbourhood with big trees. Marcus had shown me around himself instead of using a property manager. He pointed out the quirks, the radiator that clanked, the window in the bedroom that stuck, the good water pressure in the shower. He had this way of talking that was straightforward but warm, and I liked him immediately. "I live upstairs," he'd said. "I'm pretty quiet. I work from home, do freelance editing. If you ever need anything, just knock." I'd knocked a lot in those first few months. The radiator stopped working and he came down with tools to fix it. I locked myself out and he had a spare key. He invited me up for coffee one Saturday morning when he saw me struggling to carry groceries up the front steps. That coffee turned into a 3-hour conversation about books and travel, and the weird way gentrification was changing the neighbourhood. He told me about teaching English in Japan in his 20s. I told him about dropping out of grad school because I realised I was only there to make my parents happy. It became a routine. Coffee most mornings before I left for work at the bookstore. Sometimes dinner, taking turns cooking. He made this incredible Thai curry. I made passable pasta. We watched old movies on his ancient TV. We didn't talk about everything. Not at first. I knew he'd lived alone for a long time. I knew he'd never been married. He knew I'd dated both women and men, that my last relationship had been with a guy named Patrick who cheated on me, and then acted like I was the unreasonable one for being hurt. What I didn't know, what I didn't let myself think about, was why Marcus's company felt different from anyone else's, why I looked forward to seeing him more than I looked forward to anything else in my day. Why I noticed things like the way he stirred sugar into his coffee, 3 careful circles with the spoon, the way he laughed at his own jokes before he finished telling them, the way his hand felt on my shoulder when he passed behind me in the kitchen, casual and warm and somehow important. After I put him down as my emergency contact, things shifted, not dramatically, not in a way I could point to and say, "There." That's when everything changed. But I became more aware of him, of us, of the space we occupied together. I started noticing the way he looked at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't paying attention. this soft, almost sad expression that disappeared as soon as I caught him at it. I started noticing how often we touched, little incidental contacts that felt electric, his knee against mine on the couch, his fingers brushing my hand when he passed me a mug, the way he'd rest his palm on my back when we stood side by side at his kitchen counter. I started noticing how much I wanted to touch him, how I'd find excuses to stand close, how I'd lean into those casual contacts and feel disappointed when they ended. One night in December, we were up in his apartment wrapping Christmas presents. I was helping him wrap books for his nephews, and we had paper and tape and ribbon spread all over his dining table. The radio was playing old jazz, and he was telling me about the Christmas his mother had accidentally donated all the presents before Christmas morning, and I was laughing so hard I could barely hold the scissors. He looked at me with that expression again, the soft one, and this time he didn't look away when I noticed. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. You have a good laugh. I like hearing it." My face went hot. "Thanks," I said, and fumbled with the tape. "Dylan," he said, and something in his voice made me look up. "Can I tell you something?" My heart was suddenly beating too fast. "Yeah, of course." He set down the book he was holding and took off his reading glasses, folded them carefully, set them on the table. He did that when he needed to say something important. I'd learned that about him. "I don't want to make things weird," he said. "And if this is completely off base, we can pretend I never said it. But I think you should know that I care about you, more than just as a friend or a tenant or whatever we're supposed to be." I couldn't breathe. I literally forgot how to make my lungs work. "I'm an old man," he continued, looking down at his hands. "I know that. And you're young, and you have your whole life ahead of you. But you asked me to be your emergency contact, and I've been carrying that around for weeks like it's the most precious thing anyone's ever given me. And I realized I can't keep pretending I don't feel what I feel." "Marcus," I managed to say. "You don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know. I've spent 40 years not saying things I should have said, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being afraid." 40 years. The number hit me like a physical thing. 40 years of what? Of hiding. Of wanting things he didn't let himself have. Of being alone in this apartment, in this life, waiting for something he thought would never come. "I care about you too," I said, and my voice came out rough. "I've been trying not to think about it because I didn't know if I didn't know if you'd want. God, I'm saying this badly." He looked up at me, and his eyes were bright, and I realized with a shock that he might cry. Marcus, who was always composed, always steady. "You're not saying it badly," he said. "I think about you all the time," I said, the words tumbling out now. "I think about what it would be like to kiss you. I think about falling asleep next to you. I think about building a life with you, and then I tell myself I'm being ridiculous because you're my landlord, and you're probably straight, and you probably just see me as some kid who lives downstairs." "I'm not straight," he said quietly. "I've never been straight, and I've never seen you as just some kid." The silence that followed was enormous. I could hear the jazz on the radio, something slow and sweet. I could hear the radiator ticking. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. "I wasted a lot of time," Marcus said. "I grew up in a different era. I let fear make my decisions for me. I had relationships, but I never let them be real. Never let anyone all the way in. I told myself I was protecting myself, but really I was just waiting for something, for someone. And then you moved in downstairs and you knocked on my door about a broken radiator, and I thought, oh, there you are. Finally." I stood up from my chair and walked around the table to where he sat. He looked up at me, uncertain, vulnerable, in a way I'd never seen him. I touched his face, traced the line of his jaw with my thumb. His skin was warm and a little rough and perfect. "Can I kiss you?" I asked. "Please," he whispered. I leaned down and pressed my lips to his, gentle at first, testing. He made this small sound in the back of his throat and reached up to cup the back of my head, pulling me closer. The kiss deepened, became something urgent and real and a little desperate, like we were both trying to make up for lost time. His mouth tasted like the peppermint tea he'd been drinking. His hand in my hair was trembling slightly. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he looked dazed. "I've been wanting to do that since about a week after you moved in," I admitted. He laughed, shaky and genuine. "I've been wanting it since I saw you trying to carry that broken bookshelf up the front steps by yourself. You were so determined, So stubborn. I thought you were beautiful. Beautiful. The word settled into my chest and stayed there, warm and bright. We didn't finish wrapping the presents that night. We sat on his couch instead, my head on his shoulder, his arm around me, talking about everything we'd been too afraid to say. He told me about being young and closeted and scared, about brief relationships that never went anywhere because he couldn't let them, about watching the world change and wondering if he'd waited too long, if he'd missed his chance at having what he really wanted. I told him about my own fears, about feeling like I was always too much or not enough, about Patrick and the way that relationship had made me doubt my own judgment, about being lonely in a way that had nothing to do with being alone. "I'm not good at this," Marcus said at some point, his fingers tracing patterns on my arm. "I don't know how to be in a relationship, not a real one." "Neither do I said. "We'll figure it out together." "I'm going to mess up," he warned. "Me too," I said. "Probably a lot." "I'm set in my ways. I like my routines." "I'll learn your routines. You'll learn mine." He kissed the top of my head. "You make it sound simple." "Maybe it is simple," I said. "Maybe we've both been making it complicated because we were scared." He was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, "When you put me down as your emergency contact, I went upstairs and cried. I sat in this chair and cried like I haven't cried in decades, because it meant you trusted me. It meant I mattered to you, and I realized I'd been waiting 40 years for someone to choose me like that, to say, I want you to be the person who shows up for me." My throat felt tight. "I do choose you. I choose you so much." "I choose you too," he said. "God, Dylan, I choose you too." We started dating officially after that night. It felt strange to use that word at first. Dating. Like we were teenagers instead of two adults who'd already built half a life together without realizing it. But we went on actual dates, dinner at restaurants, movies at the old theatre downtown, walks through the park where we held hands and I felt proud and nervous and happy all at once. We told people. His nephews, who were surprised but supportive. My parents, who were less supportive, at least at first. My mum kept saying things like, "Are you sure? And that's quite an age gap," until I finally told her that Marcus made me happier than anyone ever had, and if she couldn't be happy for me, she could at least be quiet about it. My sister called me out of the blue one night, and we talked for 2 hours. She apologised for the fight. I apologised back. I told her about Marcus, and she said, "You sound different, lighter. I'm glad you found someone who makes you sound like that." The age difference was something we had to navigate. People stared sometimes when we were out together. Someone at the bookstore asked if Marcus was my father, and I had to politely correct them while my face burned. But mostly it didn't matter. When we were alone, in his apartment or mine, cooking dinner or reading on the couch or lying in bed talking until late, the years between us felt irrelevant. We were just two people who'd found each other. He did mess up sometimes. He got weird about money, insisted on paying for everything, until I had to sit him down and explain that I needed to contribute, that it wasn't about the money, but about feeling like an equal partner. He had moments of panic where he'd pull back emotionally, convinced he was too old, too set in his ways, too damaged to be what I needed. I had to learn to recognise those moments, to be patient, to reassure him without making him feel pitied. I messed up too. I was messy and disorganised in ways that drove him crazy. I forgot plans we'd made. I got insecure and picked fights about nothing because I was really just scared he'd wake up one day and realise he could do better. He had to learn to call me on my bullshit, to tell me when I was being unfair, to not let me spiral. But we figured it out. Slowly. Imperfectly. We figured out how to be together. About 6 months after that first kiss, I moved upstairs permanently. We combined our apartments into one space, knocking down a wall, mixing our furniture and books and lives together. I kept my emergency contact form in a drawer, the one with his name on it, because it still felt important. The beginning of something. One night we were lying in bed, the windows open to let in the spring air, and he said, "Thank you for waiting for me." "I wasn't waiting," I said. "I didn't even know you existed." "But you waited anyway," he insisted. "You didn't settle for something less. You kept yourself open to this, to us, even when you didn't know it was coming." I turned to face him, traced the lines around his eyes that deepened when he smiled. "You waited too. 40 years. 40 years, he agreed. "And you were worth every single one of them." I kissed him, soft and slow, and thought about all the ways we'd found each other. Through broken radiators and locked doors and emergency contact forms. Through coffee and curry and Christmas presents. Through honesty and fear and the courage to say the things we'd been too afraid to say. "I love you," I told him. "I love you too," he said. "Thank you for knocking on my door." "Thank you for answering," I said. And we fell asleep like that, tangled together. Two people who'd spent too long alone finally finding home in each other. He'd waited 40 years to be someone's emergency contact, to be chosen, to matter in that specific and important way. And I'd waited my whole life without knowing it for someone exactly like him. Someone steady and kind and real. Someone who saw me and loved me anyway. Someone who taught me that it's never too late to find what you're looking for, and sometimes the best things come when you're not looking at all. When you're just living your life and someone knocks on your door about a broken radiator and changes everything. Total_char_count 16,847.